Hello everyone, and I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest narrating Telltale games, Transformers, and more. So before this video starts, I'd like to apologize first for the sound of my voice if I sound a little congested at all. I don't know why. The morning I woke up, I've just felt really congested. But don't worry, I'm not sick or anything. I don't have COVID or any other bad thing, God forbid. So I'm all fine. I'm safe. Don't worry about me. I'm just feeling like really. It's been happening lately these past few days. I've just felt really congested waking up some days, and it just feels really weird. But anyway, that's enough about me. I hope you just understand my voice comes out a little weird in today's video. But for today, we're going to be looking at Transformers Cyberverse Season 2 Power of the Spark Episode 7 Parley. And honestly, this episode was a huge surprise for me. I was not expecting this to be such a good episode. In fact, it actually beats Bad Moon Rising as my favorite episode of Cyberverse so far. And I was really surprised by it, and it's a perfect mix of both like a very lighthearted episode, but it also has a surprising dark twist to the end of it that really sets the stage for not only the remainder of this season, but perhaps that even like a last second plot twist that will happen at the very end of this season. I'm really excited to learn more about. So let's just go over ahead and talk about this episode and what my thoughts on it were. This episode starts off with a flashback like many other episodes in Season 2 do. This time, though, it's back during the war for Cybertron in Cybertron at McAdams, which we last saw in Episode 10 of Season 1, which was also called McAdams. It's Megatron and Optimus meeting at McAdams, where clearly it's quite a ways into the war. It's not the flashback we saw back in McAdams, where Bumblebee was introducing Windblade to Optimus and Megatron, but instead it's well into the war. As we can see, Optimus and Megatron have the Autobot and Decepticon symbols on them, and basically it's them trying to attempt like a peace talk of some sort, but it doesn't work out, and Megatron rejects Optimus's offer for peace, and so Optimus is just feeling hopeless about the whole situation when McAdam comes down to sit to him, basically talking about how many times he's tried and failed to create the perfect mix of Energon, but then like after the 5,000th or 4,000th time finally managed to get it right, and that even if he fails so many times, the one time where you actually get it right, it will make it worth it in the end. And Optimus kind of takes that to heart when we cut back to the present day storyline, where Wheeljack has created a sort of like a little like neutral ground for Optimus and Megatron to have their peace talks with. And sure enough, the Nemesis docks down just moments later with with Shockwave and with Soundwave and I believe Shadow Striker accompanying Megatron, while Windblade and Grimlock accompany Optimus as they begin talks for peace. Now, we can consider this the main plot of the episode per se, and I gotta say, this episode, it also gives us a lot of, the Visitor was kind of our slice of life episode for the Autobots, and Bring Me the Spark of Optimus Prime was the slice of life episode for the Decepticons. You can consider like the first half of this episode, or just sort of the A-plot of this episode, essentially a crossover between those two episodes, where we kind of just get to see all the different Autobots and Decepticons interact with each other. Like, we start off with Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and Cheetor just sitting like on the volcano outside the Ark, watching the peace talks go on. And while Bumblebee and Hot Rod are kind of dismissive about the fact that Megatron and Optimus will actually be able to create a peace treaty between the Autobots and Decepticons, Cheetor is a lot more optimistic. And honestly, the more and more I listen to Cheetor, I'm falling in love with him even more and more. Like, honestly, I love how like happy-go-lucky he is, and just how aloof he is. It almost reminds me in a way, if anyone here's played Apex Legends, reminds me a lot of Pathfinder's character, because I've been playing a lot of that over the past few months, getting back into it around Season 8, and I'm just falling absolutely in love with Cheetor's character this season. But anyway, alongside Hot Rod, Bumblebee, and Cheetor, we also get to see a bunch of other Autobots and Decepticons react to the treaty. We see this funny scene with Clobber and Lockdown mocking Rack and Ruin from afar, who's Rack and Ruin are doing the exact same thing to Clobber and Lockdown. We also see Shockwave and Wheeljack hanging out, and even Prowl and Shadow Striker are talking to each other, where they're kind of just like threatening each other, where Shadow Striker's threatening to like go with like attack Hot Rod because she knows that the peace trees talks are gonna last long. But it's a nice little subversion for how the rest of the episode goes, because it starts when we finally cut back to the actual talks between Optimus and Megatron with Soundwave, Grimlock, Windblade, and I believe not Shadow Striker. It's Soundwave, Shockwave, Windblade, and Grimlock. Those 4 are there too, and Megatron and Optimus actually seem to be getting along for the most part during these talks, and it's surprising that Megatron and Optimus are actually getting along when all the other Autobots and Decepticons are. Like, we see this really funny part where Soundwave is just playing this really dramatic, tense music throughout the whole thing that's just really annoying Windblade, and even Grimlock is getting angered by Shockwave because he just keeps staring at him. And I love the interactions between Shockwave and Grimlock, knowing that Ryan Andes plays both of them. So interesting to see basically have Ryan Andes have a conversation with himself playing 2 different characters, and totally like, I think I'm not just saying this because he follows me on Twitter, but man, Ryan Andes, I've been really impressed with his performances as both Grimlock and Shockwave throughout the latter half of season 1 and so far in season 2. I've really enjoyed his performances. So eventually Windblade, Soundwave start fighting, then Grimlock and Shockwave start fighting, and eventually Megatron is the one who just says, oh, like he's had enough with all of them, and just has Soundwave and Shockwave leave, and while Optimus does the same with Windblade and Grimlock. And from that, we also see we see Megatron and Optimus actually getting along even more, and that seems to reflect towards all the other Autobots and Decepticons. We see this really cute scene in particular where Wheeljack and Shockwave are just talking, and Shockwave is showing off his little drones that Wheeljack actually helped make back in season 1 McAdams. We even get to see a little repeat of the little Nutcracker techno remix dance that Shockwave's little mini drones did back in that episode when Wheeljack helped create them. And it creates a nice little chemistry between Wheeljack and Shockwave, with both of them being the scientists of their respective factions. We even get a nice little surprising scene between Shadow Striker and Prowl, where Bumblebee, Hot Rod, and Cheetor are just walking around waiting to see when the peace talks end, when all of a sudden Shadow Striker points a gun at them, and they think that she's about to, that the tree's off and that she's going to try to kill them, but it's instead actually Prowl just showing Shadow Striker how to shoot properly with her Energon shotgun. And I honestly think that's, it's really cool to see, kind of this camaraderie be formed between Shadow Striker and Prowl, because we saw them first interact back in episode 1 of this season, where we saw the little flashback of Prowl chasing Shadow Striker on the one Earth street, and we even saw a little bit with them fighting towards that late end of that episode where Shadow Striker battles Hot Rod and Prowl. But to see them actually getting along and giving each other tips on how to shoot better, I really like that. It's a cute thing to see. That brings us to the B plot of this episode, which is sort of just happening in between different bits of the main plot here with Megatron and Optimus' peace talks. Basically, it involves, we cut back to where the episode 6 Dark Birth ended, with Starscream creating all the scraplets, and we're seen to be led to believe that Starscream truly is going insane at this point, as he starts referring to all the different scraplets that he's created as different members of the original 13 Primes, and he basically states that he gave them new bodies in the form of these scraplets that will devour all of the Autobots and Decepticons. And yeah, at that point, Slipstream just feels that Starscream's absolutely lost his mind, and that she's going to tell the Autobots and the Decepticons about what he's doing. And obviously, Starscream's not going to have that, so even though he offered to spare her life back in the end of last episode, Dark Birth, Starscream now tries to kill Slipstream by shooting at her a bit, but then the scraplets chase after her as well, and before she can escape, one scraplet does manage to bite her arm, disabling it, but despite that, Slipstream is still able to escape and eventually make her way to the Nemesis, which is currently parked outside the Ark with the volcano. And we get a really interesting scene here where Slipstream finds Soundwave and tries to convince him that she knows where Starscream is and they need to go and take him out now because he has the Allspark and Vector Sigma. But Soundwave just straight up starts attacking Slipstream, calling her a traitor. And I was really surprised by this because, obviously at this point, he would know from Megatron that Starscream did steal the Allspark from him. And so I guess it's not a stretch to believe that Soundwave would believe that Slipstream is in cahoots with Starscream. But it just feels a little bit odd that Soundwave thinks that way because Slipstream, we've seen how, he would see how much Slipstream despises Starscream, that she was basically harassed by him all throughout Season 1, and then even when Megatron promoted Slipstream to the head of the Seekers back at the start of this season, she seemed to relish that being above Starscream in terms of power. So why does all of a sudden Soundwave now consider Slipstream a traitor? I'm not gonna lie, this is the one con I have with this episode, and it's the only thing preventing me from giving this episode a perfect score, just like with Bad Moon Rising. So, eventually Soundwave starts battling Slipstream, and even just to almost kill her by basically, I guess, bursting her eardrums or brain module with, intense sound blast. But Slipstream manages to get out of it by shooting at Soundwave and escaping. But as Slipstream leaves, we see Bludgeon, who is Eavesdrop, who has been spying to the whole thing. And when I saw this, I thought like, oh, maybe Bludgeon's gonna go ahead and tell Megatron about this, that she knows where Starscream is. But no, something very, very big happens with Bludgeon instead, which I'm gonna get to right now, which is the end of this episode. So at the end of this episode, it's nighttime. The peace talks are almost done, and it seems like Megatron and Optimus are actually going to come to a truce for the first time in thousands of years. And so while Windblade is waiting outside to hear the verdict from them, Slipstream comes up, and initially Slipstream is noticeably very against seeing Slipstream, considering, Slipstream was essentially the main antagonist of Season 1 for the most part, and that she was always chasing after Bumblebee and Windblade, and especially Windblade and Slipstream had that intense rivalry in Season 1 as well, but Windblade, despite this, doesn't immediately start attacking Slipstream, and Slipstream tries to reason with Windblade that that she knows where Starscream is, that he's at the missile silo, and that he's got both the Allspark and Vector Sigma to wipe out all the Decepticons and Autobots. And Windblade thankfully believes in Slipstream and decides to go ahead and tell Optimus and Megatron that they found out where Starscream is. But before she can go inside and do it, Bludgeon comes up and straight up kills Slipstream. Straight up runs her through with his sword. And of course, we don't actually see this happen on screen. We just see like a little cutaway where we clearly see Slipstream reacting to Bludgeon impaling her through the stomach with his sword, but we don't actually see the actual sword go through her. We do see a little bit of him pulling his sword out of her, but still, it's so crazy that Bludgeon just so mercilessly kills Slipstream like that. And I kind of see this, considering that now that Starscream's the main antagonist of Cyberverse, so to speak, it makes sense that Slipstream would be killed off since she's kind of useless now, and considering that she was just like a sort of a bumbling idiot back in Season 1, I don't hate the fact that Slipstream is dead, but it just comes out such left field that Bludgeon just kills her off so mercilessly, and this just shocks Windblade so much that she starts fighting Bludgeon, and it all goes downhill from here. So while Windblade's battling Bludgeon, Bumblebee starts shooting at Bludgeon as well, seeing him attack Windblade, and because Shadow Striker is there as well, she doesn't get the fact that Bludgeon killed Slipstream and then tried to attack Windblade, so she thinks that Bumblebee just started firing on Windblade and Bumblebee. So Shadow Striker now starts battling, starts shooting at Bumblebee and Windblade, and then Prowl starts battling at her, and just sort of all devolves into chaos from there. We have Shockwave turning his drones on Wheeljack, who thankfully manages to protect himself by shooting himself with a force field gun, and then Grimlock ends up joining the battle with Windblade, Bumblebee, Shadow Striker, and Prowl as well. Eventually ends with Grimlock either getting knocked through the building that Megatron Optimus in, or Grimlock knocking Shadow Striker through the building. And eventually Shadow Striker basically tells Megatron that Bumblebee and Windblade broke the treaty by just attacking Bludgeon, and that just calls it off for Megatron just when they were about to finally actually broker peace. And it's really a nice subversion, because with the way this episode starts with Optimus getting the speech from McCann about how the one time it actually works makes all the failures worth it, you really think that we're actually going to get peace between the Autobots and Decepticons in this episode, but no, we actually don't, and it seems like it's just going to be up to the Autobots to take down Starscream and get the Allspark back, which is really surprising. And the one thing I really want to talk about is, why did Bludgeon kill Slipstream? Because for what we've seen, he's just been so loyal to Megatron, and now all of a sudden he kills Slipstream, the one person who could have helped Megatron find Starscream and get the Allspark back. So what does this mean for Bludgeon? Is he secretly a mole for Starscream? Is he another mole for him, and that he's sort of just taking out whoever he can to make sure Starscream accomplishes his goal? Or does he have some ulterior motive that he's actually gonna be the final villain for Cyberverse Season 2, that maybe after they beat Starscream, Bludgeon takes this Allspark, and then he's either got some grand scheme, or maybe he's working for someone even bigger than Megatron. Who knows? But after that, after all the Decepticons leave, we see Bumblebee, Windblade, Hot Rod, and Cheetor all surrounding Slipstream as she dies, and then finally when she dies, Cheetor confirms it by saying that her spark is returned to the Allspark, where we see basically just a little end clip of her spark returning to the Allspark. And I gotta say, it's kind of a, it's not, I wouldn't say, it's a bittersweet end to Slipstream's character, because while I wasn't the biggest fan of her character, I did think that she was just sort of a jobber per se, and her role in Season 2 hasn't been that big. It is still sad to see her go, and I definitely think there was a chance for her to have a sort of redemption arc. But despite that, though, I do think, though, it's also a fitting end for Slipstream that that the Autobots do know now where Starscream is, thanks to her, and where that goes from here, who knows. And so, that was my review of Transformers Cyberverse Season 2, Episode 7, Parley. If I had to rate this episode, again, I would give it a 9.75 out of 10. Arguably, this is my favorite episode of Transformers Cyberverse so far. It's got a perfect mix of lighthearted comedy where we have all the Autobots and Decepticons learning to work together with each other, with a very dark twist that progressed the main plot by having Bludgeon presumably being a mole for Starscream, or just having his own ulterior agenda, and killing Slipstream off. That's making it our first main death this season. Season 1, we only had one main death in the form of Blur, but that was through a flashback. So this is actually, if you really consider it, this is our first real main death in the entire show. So to have Slipstream be our first main death, I was totally surprised by. I thought for sure it would be like an Autobot like Prowl, or maybe even Wheeljack who dies. But to have Slipstream be our first main death in Cyberverse, I was really surprised by that. And I'm really eager to see now that it seems as though the Autobots and Decepticons aren't going to be working together. It's going to be up to the Autobots to take down Starscream then. And so I'm really interested to see where that's going. So that's going to be it for this episode. I'll be back soon with Episode 8, Starscream's Children, which from the title alone, I'm very excited to review. If you like this review, be sure to like, comment, and of course subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Take it away, Bumblebee.
Bumblebee out.
And I might know what our future, but then you still control the past.